Now, we're still staying in Parliament because it has passed into law the first ever bill proposed by MPs themselves, not coming from the executive. The Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2020 introduces stiffer punishment for road traffic offenders whose actions lead to the death of an unborn child. This is the first time in history that a private member's bill proposed by MPs has been approved by Parliament. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo is joining us to help us understand the context of this. Joseph, it's good to have you. Let's begin with what this means, first of all.
So, Gifty, the new thing that's coming through is that less than an hour ago, Parliament passed the first ever private member's bill, a bill which has actually been proposed by MPs and then it's gotten approval from the House. For a very long time, the only bills that Parliament has actually passed, it has to do with bills that have come to Parliament on behalf of the President and laid by various ministers of state. And it has to do with a provision in Article 108 of the Constitution. It says that before any bill can be introduced in Parliament, that would eventually have implications on the consolidated fund, or for that matter, public funds, as far as the Republic of Ghana is concerned. It can only be approved by Parliament if it has the explicit approval of the President. And so for a very long time, there's been the argument that very senior legal people, as well as the Parliament of Ghana and even various governments have made, that no MP can introduce a private member's bill, because eventually when the bill gets passed into law, then it's something that would cost the state. So all of that still has to be done with the approval of the President, and that has actually avoided some of these situations for several years now. But Professor Michael Quay, who is the current speaker, has repeatedly argued that he is convinced that MPs should have the right, as it happens in several other parliaments across the world, to introduce legislations and get it passed. And sometime earlier this year, the first of said documents was introduced, co-sponsored by Ras Mubarak, who is the MP for Kumbungu, the chairman of Parliament's Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee, that's Ben Abdallah Banda, as well as the minority leader Haruna Idrisu, and the majority leader Osei Mensah Bonsu. And it does an amendment to the Road Traffic Act of 2004. The Road Traffic Act of 2004, which was subsequently amended in 2008, actually make provisions that say when a road user, whether a vehicle user or a cycler, goes ahead to knock down a pedestrian or cause injury to anybody, and the person is a pregnant woman, the only person who can be prosecuted is actually, the offender can be prosecuted, but he can only be prosecuted for the damage that caused to the pregnant woman herself and not the baby in the womb. But with this amendment, which has just passed, apart from any prosecution that may target the damage caused to the pregnant woman, the damage caused to the fetus in the womb as well would also be dealt with, and the offender can go to prison for a minimum term of 3 years and a maximum term of 7 years. It's generated a lot of conversation. The Speaker, for example, sees it as landmark and makes the point that it opens room for MPs going forward to make their own proposals and introduce various legislations. Let me get a quick comment on this. The Kumbungu MP, Ras Mubarak, who is actually an outgoing MP, but sponsored this bill jointly with the leaders on both sides, and the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee chairman is actually joining us. How remarkable is what Parliament just did? First of all, when it comes to ensuring that the legislature is actually in the business of passing laws that it introduces itself.
Well, it's a landmark legislation. It took a lot of works, to have it passed. And I must use this opportunity to commend the Speaker of Parliament for the opportunity to have this passed. It benefits women up and down the country, pregnant women who, through no fault of theirs, through the recklessness of drivers or riders, would not just be injured, but have the fetus in their womb, injured or died. What the law prescribes is some punishment for persons who are driving recklessly or riding recklessly. With current legislation, it made provisions for you know, passengers or pedestrians who got injured as a result of an accident. But this particular one places a burden on drivers to drive carefully, on riders to ride carefully, because if you did not, and out of your recklessness, you knock down a pregnant woman, and it's found out that the fetus in her womb is injured or has died, not only would you be charged for causing injury to the woman, you would be charged for causing injury or death to the fetus in the womb. And I mean, this is very remarkable.
What would it mean for the legislative arm going forward in terms of the ability of MPs to introduce bills and get it passed, as has never been seen before in the history of Parliament?
It's broken and shattered the glass ceiling, and the four of us, Speaker, and every other member of Parliament of the 7th Parliament should be proud that we contributed to bringing this about. It opens doors for, you know, further closure of loopholes in existing legislations. If you look at the composition of the 8th Parliament, for instance, it provides the 8th Parliament an opportunity to, you know, close the loopholes in redundant laws to bring about new legislations. Take, for instance, the issue of party campaign financing. This is something obviously a party in government would not want to bring legislation to Parliament to have it passed.
But an MP can do that based on what we've seen.
Based on what we've seen, an MP can look at any legislation that has loopholes and propose amendments to those loopholes or bring about a completely new legislation.
Many thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
Ras Mubarak is the Member of Parliament for the Kumbungu constituency. And even as the House concluded the debate on this and got it approved, the Speaker, Professor Maikoku, rightly observed that going forward, the research departments of Parliament should do more in terms of getting more of these legislations out through members of Parliament without it necessarily coming from the executive arm of government. Gifty.
Joseph, I know other things happened in Parliament, but just on the back of the interview you've just done and the story you just told us, does this, by the stretch of our imagination, point to a more collaborative minority, if you like, or a more collaborative NDC MPs with the NPP MPs going forward?
Put that quickly to the Kumbungu MP, Ras Mubarak. He was drawing attention to that it then opens doors for more collaboration. So what does this mean in terms of how MPs, particularly in the 8th Parliament, need to work together? And, you know, there is this entire conversation about a parliament that's looking hung and virtually split. With this glass ceiling being broken, as you rightly indicated, what would that mean for the House in terms of cooperation and working together going forward?
Well, it's officially a hung parliament. It is officially a hung parliament, even though we are hoping that we would clash the Techiman South seat to give us a majority in parliament. But obviously, consensus would have to be built, as we have seen in this particular legislation. Obviously, members of the House would have to reach across the aisle to each other and build consensus and build bridges on the most important things for the country. But I think it's going to be a very exciting parliament. But it also takes away the issue of majority gets its way. Currently, with a hung parliament, there's nobody who is majority or minority. We are all, you know, equal, 137 as announced by the Electoral Commission.
If the former MP sits with them, as in the NPP,
at any given,
they have that extra.
At any given time, you can't guarantee that all government ministers would be in the House to do government business. I mean, Parliament or leadership could decide to schedule a particular date for votes on key things on the floor. But you can't guarantee that somebody would not fall ill. You can't guarantee that a minister would not be stuck outside of the country, as in the case of the Honorable Akotosai, you know, during COVID, who got stuck in the US.
It could happen to both sides.
And could not fly back.
It could happen to both
the country. It could happen to both sides. But the interesting thing is that you're going to have to need a very effective whip in the 8th Parliament to ensure that everybody is there to deliver the votes.
Many thanks for speaking to us. But just to clarify, so there is that admission that if the former MP sit to the MPP side, they will then be able to appoint whoever the majority leader will be and may have the upper hand in terms of getting a speaker, at least until the challenge that's been put to the 5 constituencies the NDC is seeking to challenge is done, right?
I'm hoping that the various courts would speedily, rule on those cases so that we get to know the numbers before the 7th of January. If it were to happen that way, it would be good not just for our democracy but for our country generally, because the rest of Africa is looking to Ghana for leadership. Never in our history have we had a situation like this, especially under the 1992 Constitution, and this is an opportunity to get things done. We in the NDC are confident that we would form majority. We in the NDC are confident that indeed we would be electing the next speaker of the 8th Parliament.
But that's subject to what will happen in the 5 outstanding constituencies. Otherwise, then it will be the MPP side.
That is subject to what will happen in the outstanding 5 constitution. But also we have seen instances where MPs were unavailable during swearing in, but have had to be sworn in at a later date. So we are hoping also that by the 7th of January, a lot of MPs will be out of the country, so we can just get to elect a Speaker of Parliament.
Many thanks for speaking to us, the Kumbungu MP Ras Mubarak there. And Gifty, very interestingly, earlier today, the majority leader, Oseichi Mensah Bonsu, urged members of parliament to take their security seriously going forward.
Yeah.
He specifically referenced the need for them to enhance security around themselves between now and the 7th of January. And he made the point that currently there are a lot of, to use his words, devilish people around. He cited a situation in his constituency where an individual attacked the brother for supporting him, Mensah Bonsu, and that led to a fatal situation that he said could happen to even members of parliament between now and the 7th of January. So on the floor, he encouraged MPs to enhance security around themselves. He encouraged MPs to reach out to the security team here in parliament if they have any difficult situations or peculiar situations, so that then by the 7th of January, everyone will be available for a vote in the House. That's 7th January 2021 as the 8th Parliament begins work.